Not necessarily. No.
Okay. Symposium it is.
Because an interview is a little bit call and response. There's an interviewer who is literally steering, and that's not really my style. So, I mean, I hesitate to call it an interview really because I open up the floor and I don't make it personal and I don't really delve into much. I just say, why don't you, give me a broad sense of your feeling about blank, blank, blank. And that, to me, that feels a little more sympanistic.
Cool. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I still have things I have to do for you. Well, not for you, but for Awaken Network. I still have to, I have hours of me and Barry playing, jamming, that I would love to share with. Are you still? Is everything still going on the Awaken Network for the music stuff?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll cut that up and send little bite-sized nuggets. Anyway, you said you had to prepare, so I'll let you prepare.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Right now, Vera is actually Vera's people are looking over the contract as we speak. So
okay,
that's cool. All right. That's done. That's done. You're still there. I didn't lose you, eh?
I'm still here.
Sweet. Excellent. All right. Okay. I don't know why that's playing back. Okay, bear with me for a minute.
Baron.
All right. I'm just going to go and quickly go to the channel and make sure that this is actually working. You could test something all you want, but until you actually go live, you have no idea what is actually happening.
True. Well, the whole thing is that, and the importance of watching back our stuff is that, as scary as it is to be our own critics, you kind of have to, right? I'm
go to the channel and make sure that this is okay. Working. Cool. Awesome. So it's about a 7-second delay. Okay, awesome. Good to know. Test something all you want until you actually pause. Okay, awesome. Okay, we're live. Welcome everybody to Knowledge for Growth channel. We are still running Origins on Knowledge for Growth because I haven't gotten totally finished up on the Origins YouTube channel yet. So that's still in the works. Pardon me on that. I do apologize. I did, say that I was going to do that and I didn't, and my bad. But we're here. We are on YouTube this time, legitimately on YouTube, and not just Zoom telling us that we're on YouTube. And I've got Breathing Heathen here. Bit of a different Origins episode tonight. Tonight we're going to actually talk about Breathing's brand new book. I don't. I mean, you have the proof with you. Is that correct?
I
There
have
you go.
the proof that it exists.
And for those who don't know, proof in the printing world, that is just what a printer sends to the person who is saying yes, print that. It's called the proof, whether that's a business card or a manual or a novel. That's the terminology. So now you all know a little bit of something about the nuts and bolts of the editing process. I'd like to start off by just talking about if you could just talk about your personal inspiration for this story. Did you everybody's got a different process when they sit down to write a story. Did you sit down and say, I want to write a story about, or did you just start writing a story and then it became what it is?
Well, that's a loaded question. I got a bunch
Sure
of
is.
answers. Uh, I don't know. My life took a big turn after my mom passed away 5 years ago, International Women's Day, and I sort of everything kind of fell apart, as things tend to do if you don't grieve properly. And so I think it's very important for people to understand that grieving properly is not just something counselors tell you to do. I guess, so the educational path I was on, that came to a standstill. Relationship and home and all of that gone. I was living in a 2002 Dodge Caravan that I'd sort of set up to be a bit of a living room. And I found a local coffee shop run by a charismatic owner who was just really into coffee. It was a big, and you'll actually, when you're reading the book, you'll see evidence of that.
Okay.
One of the main characters. And so I would just sit there, and I took one of my mom's old short stories that she had published. She was an editor of magazines in the Okanagan in British Columbia, Canada. And one of the main magazines she did was Okanagan Life. And while she was doing her editing work, and being a managing editor is not an easy job, wasn't easy on her. It's a very male-dominated industry. But she was go, go, go. She had boundless, infinite energy. And so she also put her creative writing degree to good work and offered classes and courses for people and did her own publishing. She helped many people publish their own books. And so that's kind of the environment that I come out of.
Mm-hmm.
She wrote a short story that was a bit of a parody of her own life. It was creative nonfiction, which was the type of writing that she taught, using elements of her own life, but exaggerating them so that they make interesting fiction. They say the truth is stranger than fiction, and a lot of times in the process of writing your own autobiography, you write things that are unbelievable. So I just decided to pick up from one of the short stories that she wrote about her son burning down the house. And it's based on an actual thing that I did. I tried to wire my own lighting system in my room when I was 17 years old. And my dad came home and looked at the wiring. And as you can imagine, it was all taped up with electrical tape and major fire hazard. And all heck broke loose. And, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And so this book is essentially what would have happened if the house would have burned down.
Right.
And as you can sort of see, and it takes sort of the experiences of going through grieving and loss. It takes the experiences of coming of age. It takes the experiences of spiritual awakening and examining your own traditions. And it puts them in a narrative that loosely follows Joseph Campbell's old hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
So you know the cycle.
Mhm.
Pretty famous at this point. I have read Joseph Campbell, but I read a book about writing the hero's journey. And so that's why I thought it'd be great to sandwich this in between our look at heroic poetry and our look at anti-hero in Old Norse poetry.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing it does is it incorporates Old Norse deities and modern heathenry, like progressive heathenry, what
Mhm.
people are actually doing nowadays. And so you get the experience of going to a mead hall. The book is Three Valkyries Walk into a Mead Hall. You get the experience of going to a trendy, new, fashionable mead hall in the heart of downtown Vancouver, BC, Canada. And the quest, the MacGuffin, I guess, is that the main character wants to solve a riddle for which he must climb a forested mountain and make a connection with a Norse deity.
Mhm.
And while he's doing this, he rips some money off of I read a typical alpha for the antagonist, but a charming alpha who owns a lot of guns and ends up stalking the protagonist all the way to this mountaintop. And so it's very much about the journey through British Columbia from the city of Kamloops through some of the small towns along the way by means of different ways of travel. And that it really gives this beautiful experience of life on the road. I'm very influenced, of course, by that old beat ethic. The Kerouacian tale of going between New York and California. That kind of
Yeah.
life on the road,
Yeah. Yeah.
except
The
set in
Motorcycle
Canada.
Diaries. Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
Hunter S. Thompson got into that whole thing with the Hell's Angels as well. And,
Oh yeah, Hunter S.
you know,
Yeah, he's actually that's a lot of on the road stuff too until he gets into his later political works.
yeah, it is. And when you look at a lot of really well done fiction, the element of on the road is very prevalent. For the Ice and Fire series, there's a lot of time on the road there. I mean, the original name for the Hobbit was There and Back Again, and it
Yep.
was about that journey, and that's always there. I often say that if you look at the top 10 um, pieces of fiction in my mind, the only one that doesn't have that is the Count of Monte Cristo. But even that is a bit of a seafarer's journey, so it's a wayfarer story, and there's but that's uh, a lovely thing to put into fictions, particularly for the reader's life experience, because so many people who read books are not ever going to get that on the road experience, and so in a way you're allowing them to live vicariously and to have that experience within their mind that they may not be able to have physically. And that's a beautiful thing, and it's that's in the mechanical sense, that's what it is, and then metaphorically, um it's a great metaphor for the journey that is life.
Well, the hero's journey signifies a transformation, right? For all of us, whether it leads to great places or dark places. I think Count of
Yeah.
Monte Cristo, as an example, leads him to a very dark place. But that revenge fantasy. But most certainly, that follows the heroic, like when he meets the Abbey Feria,
Yeah.
and that's sort of like that helper that comes in with
Yeah.
sort of a magical tool, which is the promise of this treasure, this fortune.
Oh,
Um,
it's magical beans for sure. Yeah, it
yeah,
absolutely is.
Lord of the Rings does that quite literally.
Literally, yeah.
Um, and has that, but it doesn't always have to be literal. This narrative is meant to be magical realism in the way that Paulo Coelho uses magical realism, or Carlos Castaneda, or Marquez.
Hmm.
You know, how it exists in reality. It exists in reality. Magic does exist in reality.
Oh, certainly, it's everywhere.
And you find in the fiction that it justifies it the way that it exists in reality, because not everybody gets that.
No,
And so when you pick up a book about magical things, sometimes you're looking for what's his name, Lev Grossman does the Magicians, I think. You're looking for something like that, like I'm gonna wiggle my fingers and sparks are gonna fly out, or a Harry Potter book or something.
or
Um,
Brandon Sanderson, right? With
and
who's got like 8 magical systems going on now.
Right, and these are things that they reflect what magic would look like in a fictional world. They reflect what magic would look like in a different dimension, where there are different physical rules, most certainly. They don't necessarily reflect, in my opinion, the way that magic looks in this dimension.
And unfortunately, a lot of people who are seeking magic are looking for the purple smoke and the physical, tangible manifestation of a thing rather than something that you have to just know.
Right, exactly. When there's just so much magic in this dimension, you can even see it kind of when you look up at the clouds and you see the dancing lights.
Mm.
Not talking about the northern lights behind you, although they are beautiful. But the chi, the prana that if you were to travel to Korea, it's a beautiful sight. You'll walk down the street and you'll see a park filled, maybe not during COVID times, but you'll see a park filled with people doing Tai Chi. Uh, Generally older women, I find, but there are younger women and also men, but generally older women who are doing it. And if your eyes are primed, then you can see the sort of clusters of light that they're working with. And
Mhm.
it's pretty incredible. They'll do a session for half an hour or an hour long. And it's very magical to see.
Yeah,
But just seeing the clusters of light is not necessarily the amazing thing. It's seeing the determination in their heart. That's the amazing part, because that's what's doing the real magic. If you
yeah,
were to walk further down the road, you'll see how much in Korea, especially rural parts, they invest in art and culture. By my apartment building, there was a stage where they would do sort of pansori, which is an opera.
hmm,
And the sound that comes from this Korean opera is unlike anything that you've heard, and it awakens things in your mind and in your soul that you never even thought were there. Chinese opera is very similar to that as well. When you take a walk in the forest, you will definitely come upon a hermitage or a Buddhist temple, and you can see them at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning doing chows and bows and chants. And the experience of that, of being bathed in this pure ephemeral light, I've drawn upon these experiences to write this book. And even though I reference the years I spent in Asia quite a bit when I talk about it, it all takes place in Vancouver, which is fitting because in Vancouver there are a lot of different Asian cultures.
well, we Canadians tend to not in a negative or a nasty way. We often call Vancouver Vancouver. It is the most Asian place in Canada, certainly.
Mm.
And our society lends to that happening. We don't prevent that from happening, and so it does, and it's wonderful. It's not a negative thing.
It brings a lot of beauty to Vancouver. You can't talk about Vancouver without talking about uh, the Chinese New Year celebrations, uh, or talking about some of the amazing Japanese culture that has been brought to Vancouver. The part of Vancouver where there are a lot of people from India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. Uh,
Hmm.
it's everywhere you go. There's something going on. I remember when I was young, my mom took me to book festivals, And she gave me my first and most treasured children's book that I have to this day. And it was called Tales from Gold Mountain. And
Okay.
it was about the experiences of the early Chinese settlers who came to work on the railroads. And it's in some ways a very magical and beautiful history. It's in other ways a very dark and bloodstained history.
Yeah.
And the way that the author, I'm searching for his name in my brain, it'll come later. The way that the author portrays both of these sides beautifully in a way that speaks to children was nothing short of narrative magic. And so I've always been surrounded by stories of magical realism. I've always been surrounded by stories of how we can live in a world that is apparently physical, that nonetheless contains so much beauty and mysticism and metaphysics. And so that's very much reflected in this title, in this book. Valkyries walk into a mead hall. It's kind of prepares you for a little bit of cynical humor. My mom had a very dark sense of humor, very much a cynic, very much a questioner of reality. She got in a lot of trouble for one of her published poetry books called You Mistook Heaven, by making fun of the idea that the Okanagan is heaven. And Kelowna and Penticton surrounding areas, it's beautiful there. You will fall in love with it, with the orchards, but she lived there long enough to see the underbelly, to see the parts of it that people were mistaken about, the gossip circles and the boredom that would come upon people who've been there for years and years and have grown tired of this big, beautiful Lake Okanagan. And so when she started writing,
it becomes very mercenary in terms of tourism as well. That's one bad thing there. I went to a souvenir shop in Peachland once with my then wife, and we were there specifically because I'd said, "Oh yeah, the Ogopogo is a big thing down there. We'll have to get a souvenir." So we go to the souvenir shop and say, "Do you have any Ogopogo stuff?" And the lady's like, "Huh?" And I was like, "You own this shop and you don't care about the local lore at all?" I thought, like, you're not into this. You're just literally cashing in.
Do you remember if that was Chico's Paradise or Dragonfly and Amber, perhaps?
Dragonfly, yeah.
Dragonfly and Amber, oh my goodness. Yeah, no, everybody knew the owner of that shop. I won't call her out by name, but I totally understand. It's a bit of more of an import shop, a bit more about, like, she sells lots of incense and kind of stuff like that, and very worldly stuff.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you'll definitely find the Ogopogo stuff on Bernard Avenue.
Yeah.
Walking down from the sales. That's where you find the fridge magnets. But Dragonfly and Amber they would never. And it's funny because that's in Peachland, because that's where I spent my teenage years in Peachland. We got very used to the tourism ethic and the fact that people would be walking by your house, looking in your windows, and on near constant basis for about 3 months.
Yeah, and it's the same where I am now here in Creston, the Kootenay Valley. It's a little bit less tourism, and it's a little more spread out. There's a few destinations here, and they're spread out a little bit, so it's a bit of a different scene than the Okanagan, but it's the same thing. There's a lot of stores here that are open not every day for most of the year, but during tourist season, they're open 12 hours a day.
Well, so probably the experience of becoming cynical about it.
Oh yeah. And years ago, I'm from Calgary. I mean, Stampede brings it into you too. I mean, oh, look at the whole city spends a whole month getting ready for 10 days, and then we spend another 3 weeks cleaning up after it. And it's just that's your summer, you know?
lots of belt buckles and cowboy hats and
Yeah, the whole it changes. The whole city undergoes this radical transformation for tourist season. And
yeah, and
Jasper and Banff are the same, you know.
yep. Luckily with Jasper and Banff, they're kind of the gateway to kind of cool stuff like skiing, and you end up with more athletic, more driven individual,
Yeah,
and the partiers, of course.
yeah, yeah.
That's I like the ethic there. I don't mind it. It's kind of nice. And same with Waterton. It's sort of sleepy, you know. You tourist isn't even that bad, but you know the consequences for looking under the cracks and expressing your cynicism is that could possibly hurt the local economy.
And I mean that's everywhere you go and everywhere you travel as a tourist. It's you can I feel like if you're from a place or if you've lived in a place like that, you're more adept at being a tourist because you can relate to those poor people that are like, and I don't mean poor literally cash poor. I mean I feel sorry for people sometimes who live in a tourist trap because it's a different mode of life. You have to, you know, there's these people who can just come and be any way they want and be rude, and you have to be like, "Oh, you know, that's great. We need your money, so you go ahead and carry on." Like, you know,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so you know, when you say that's what I instantly went to. I was like, oh yeah, no, I've been to. I mean, BC's full of them, and Alberta has a few, but yeah, the effect. Every place that's really beautiful seems to have an element of tourism to it, and the tourist industry, for good or bad or worse, it's generally an ugly thing. It's made that way by the usury of it, and the mercenary type of mercantile that goes on. But you know, there are a few cherished, beautiful places that aren't touched by that, and generally the reason is because you have to go way off road to get there. And so,
Right. Absolutely. And you know, not long ago there was a big debate in Iceland about should we err more on the side of tourism as an industry, or I think it was, I could be wrong on this, but I think it was aluminum.
yeah, aluminum, and they're very into bioenergy study because they have, you know, all of the geothermal activity on Earth, pretty much, like probably 80% of it.
Right, right. And they could be self-sustaining and wouldn't even have to jump into the import-export circus and you know, the world order stuff. But it came down to that. How are we going to save our economy? And this was before the big collapse, right? Uh, I think because there was that big collapse and they kind of fired their bankers, and we got to read all of those
Yeah.
all of those articles on the popular streams. But it's a decision one makes to allow, you know, tourism in your beautiful, wonderful area, and you kind of know what comes along with it. But sometimes it's better than heavy industry,
Uh,
because heavy industry can very well destroy your. When all eyes are watching, right? It's
yeah,
harder for people to take big chunks out of the mountains.
that's right. That's right.
So it's sort of a, you know, it's it's a balance.
Mhm.
But like I say, my mom got in big trouble for writing about it because she has sort of a truth telling character, and that kind of cynical humor definitely shows itself in this narrative. Um,
And that's good.
yeah, I don't want to give it away too much, but it's uh, explores things that are well known to lovers of Norse mythology or heathenry, runes, staves, that sort of thing. But also, so take the conversation we just had about tourists in a tourist town. The pre Christian heathen Norse culture is kind of like a pristine and beautiful geographical location. And there is so much talk right now about how people are using heathenry to express their own personal beliefs or political ideas. And this is a conversation that, of course, has easily been happening since the 19th century, but with our media and the way that things are displayed, there's a lot of what might be construed as tourism. People sort of come in and spit on it and use it for their own thing.
Yeah.
And we haven't really seen it so strongly as we've seen in anything from cheap online gift purchases to narratives in media that focus on violent Viking masculinity and that show the Old Norse character as being barbaric, brutish, hateful, and rapey.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough because it was nice when so the Thor movie comes out, right? And you've got a bunch of people who see that Viking masculinity and want to embody that. Okay, fine. I felt really good when the Aquaman movie came out because those same people all of a sudden were from Atlantis, and it was just like, okay, they're not our problem anymore.
So we're talking about people operating on the charming side of aggressive as far as the cosplay universe goes,
There's a lot of cosplay, and I'm not even going to say bad things about cosplay because I've seen beautiful reenactments. I gotta say, the Society for Creative Anachronism has my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I love going to those things. I really enjoy. I take photos. I try the mead. Oh my goodness, they're great events. That I don't think those are the same people.
No, it's people who take that and then they misappropriate the cultural values in order to push a modern agenda. I see a lot of people flocking to heathenry because they're butthurt that there's a thing called Black Lives Matter, and they feel that they're being treated in a racist way, and that flocking to Odinism is a way for white people to fight back against that. And I don't get it. It's not congruent to me. I don't. There's no common thread there, and yet people are clutching for that. And it's simply that they want to speak out, and they don't have the cojones to speak out on their own terms. They instead take up a cultural background, or they represent a cultural background that allows them to say those things and just go, well, hey, I'm a Viking, that's what I do. And it's really sad. And it's, in my lifetime, it's happened 3 or 4 times. When Ireland took off, and there was the golden calf economy there, and Ireland was the rage everywhere. The level of anti-British attitude went through the roof, because I was in the UK at that time, and all of a sudden everybody was anti-British. These are things that happened a long time ago. It's not relevant anymore, and people want to stir that up because it's the in thing. And all of a sudden, IRA songs that weren't all that popular during the movement are now more popular post revolution than they were during. And that happens. People take a hold of fads and they run with it, and that's okay when it's clothes or some music style or whatever. But when you're talking about a cultural movement, and then that suddenly becomes fad and people start to misappropriate that, it gets really ugly. Really ugly.
Well, what I hope for people who want to use it as a political statement, or people who want to use it because they saw a Marvel movie, or Odin forbid, they read Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. however they came into it, however people decide that they want to invest their time and their energy into a culture that derives from pre-Christian Europe. My hope is that they find a gift.
Yeah.
My hope is that whatever it was that interested them in that, where it leads is to the beauty of the culture. Because
Rather
one
than
thing,
using it as a negative, as a weapon.
well, and let's consider this also. We've talked about Quebec before in Origins on certain issues.
As we must, the
You
Anglophone, they have
must.
to.
Oui, oui, c'est vrai. And I believe that in the sense that Quebec is almost perpetually fighting for sovereignty and culture, it is within all of us that we want some form of cultural sovereignty. We want some form of cultural connection that is unique to the people that we connect with.
Yeah.
And I believe that in America and also in Canada to an extent, you have people, let's just say the melanin deprived. You have light-skinned people who are looking around and saying, what's my culture? And in Canada, you look around, like Canada itself, the name Canada comes from a First Nations word. Clearly, our tiny little century and a half of squatting here does not necessarily entitle us to have a culture connected to the land.
Mm-hmm.
So where do we look? Well, sometimes we look elsewhere. We look back to Europe. But if modern Europe doesn't give us a home so much, a cultural feeling, if we don't speak the modern languages, if we don't speak Swedish, if we don't speak French, then what is our hold and what is our connection? Well, you can find it in the more ancient culture. You can find it in pre-colonial periods. You can find it in a time when there weren't borders. There weren't nations, not really. A nation was the group of people who followed the king. And it's an exciting, imaginative exercise.
Yeah.
And I think giving somebody a sense of culture in a place where they feel they have none is very fulfilling. And to deprive someone of that fulfillment, I consider to be a crime.
Yeah. I often, pardon any of my Druid brethren that might be watching, but I'm in Druidry. I spent 7 years, and that unfortunately there is a certain amount of that within Druidry, in that you have to have a certain last name, you have to have a certain lineage, you have to come from a certain place in the world. They have this, it's a blood right thing going on, and I didn't subscribe, and the people who I learned from didn't subscribe to that, but it was very much there, and it is the reason that there's only Obod now. There was a big divide in the entire culture, and that was caused by some people saying, no, only Irish, Scottish, and Welsh people may call themselves Druids, and they, you have to have you have to have a last name to back that up. You can't have been away for more than 3 generations, and it goes on and on. And that occurs in many of the, like we say, the pre-Christian European movements. That's a theme there. Luckily enough, it's going away. And luckily enough, we can say that the negative components that are existing right now are probably going to be gone in a year when they find, as you say, another thing to latch onto. They'll be from Atlantis in a year when Aquaman. So it's about weathering the storm a little bit, I guess. But no, it's, and what's really nice, what I find, I mean, I haven't obviously read your book yet. We've talked about it. I know your sentiment. And you know, and I'm sure you could confirm, I feel like when you talk about culturally about what heathenry is, about what it was to be a Northern European at that point in history, you don't romanticize it as much. Um, and I think that's a good thing, because I think people can take that and find a balance. Because as you say, there are the Neil Gaiman stories where it's like way over there, you know. And then when somebody else goes, well, there was a bunch of farmers, you know, like people were farmers then, and barristers and horse grooms and things. Like it wasn't all just like one unending war cycle with heroes and villains, and that's not how it ever was anywhere at any time. That's how it is in fictional books. But to really appreciate the culture, there's a lot more about it than just the heroes and the villains and the wars, you know, and the pure exploration that the Norse people did, it should be recognized, not only for the courage involved, but the fact that somebody made an incredible craft that was ahead of its time. And it probably wasn't a romantic experience. That was probably a guy with a primitive adze chiseling away at wood until he found the right shape. And some other guy had to cut that wood and haul it from way over there. And you can find appreciation in the mundane, but unfortunately in our culture we've turned the word mundane into a negative thing, when really that's what gives you the shades, right? It would all be black and white if we lived in a Lord of the Rings world, but what gives it gradation and color and depth is the fact that there's little things that you would never think about, like a guy who makes a horseshoe, or you know, a nail, or these little things that everybody overlooks because they're not exciting, they're not romantic. And so, you know, your approach in general has been that unromanticized look. And would you say that that's congruent with this volume when you talk about that Norse appreciation?
I was actually looking for the specific passage that relates. I've got other readings that I wanted to do,
Yeah.
but the specific passage, I can't seem to find it. I'll highlight it for next time. But essentially, he's looking down from the mountaintop, and he's looking at the inlets and the peninsula and all that from Mount Work, which is a mountain on the island, and you can see all the water. And he's thinking of how much he would love to be back in that romanticized time period, and how he'd love to thrust his hands into the cold water and build that boat. And then it flashes to, because you know the Sven, he has soft hands, the protagonist, and then it flashes to these men with hard hands in the time period being romanticized. And it's not like the postcard. It's not a fresh, wonderful feeling thrusting your hands into the cold water. It's something you do because you have to.
Yeah.
If you've ever pulled a ship's rope, a ship's line, if you've ever pulled it after it's been in freezing cold water, and you feel what it feels like on your hands, it's not a pleasant experience.
No.
But you do it because you have to. You don't have any other choice. And you just grit your teeth, flex, and you do it. And that juxtaposition, I think, is very beautiful that you mentioned, between the romanticized past on the postcard and what was really going on there. Because, you know, if you're just going to romanticize the Viking raids and the wars and whatnot, if you're just going to romanticize that, you're romanticizing less than 2% of what actually happened. If what you really want is a touchstone of masculinity, romanticize what was really going on in a time during which we didn't have the kind of we had indoor heating, but not the kind that we have now, where you can't just have what you want. When everything was a negotiation with nature, and nature's the best negotiator.
Oh yeah, wins every argument. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just
Absolutely.
1 second, I'm going to grab a sip. What was my question? Shoot.
Well, while you're thinking of that question, I could most certainly read one of the passages.
Yeah, absolutely. Read as many as you like. Absolutely. Let's do that.
Okay, so this is about the riddle that Sven is given. The riddle. How were we cleft? How were we divided? How could Pangaea have been broken apart by the Homo sapiens? The answer. Pangaea is perception. We were together and then we were cleft. We were one people and then we were separate. We were flesh and then we were skin. We were the world and then we were the continents. We were wanderers and then we were countries. All these notions Sven interpreted as he danced, and back came the golden-haired goddess to dance with him. They danced together the way one dances with a shadow. Sven was all that the goddess was not, the goddess all that Sven couldn't perceive. The goddess was a thing Sven looked for, and then Sven was a thing he wanted to be. Don't you see? Her voice echoed through the movements of light and dark. I am not a thing. That is my goddesshood. I am of those who stepped out of their shape and into the spaces between shapes. I do not see things, and therefore I am not a thing. Whenever you have seen yourself a broken thing, a heroic thing, an undesirable thing, a healed thing, a sick thing, a wanting thing or a wanted thing, a rich thing or a poor thing, an educated thing or a thing that thinks it's enlightened, you are always just a thing. Whatever you have seen others as things that only reinforce your own thinghood. This is the realm of the wooden people, and like the sticks of the fire, they will sit around the forest, eating, shitting, complaining, and sleeping from sunrise until sunset, until they burn to ash. The wooden people live in Athens. The wooden people collect things. The wooden people collect wooden people and are nothing but things to each other. They are boyfriend things or girlfriend things, straight things or gay things. They are different sizes and shapes and colors of things. They are things that do chores and they are things that do work. One year, woman things do chore work, man things do business work. The next year, they change roles. No true progression is made because they are still things. They're still things, and the real freedom they want is from being things, which is why no matter what thing rights they receive, they are never satisfied and they don't ever know why. When you are no longer wooden, your world expands, whereas things are put in toy boxes. We gods, which you may even call persons, are from the toy boxes, the subdivisions, the houses, the cages that things put other things into, or where they put themselves. The direction becomes clear. It's ahead of you, out there. The golden hair goddess pointed out to the strait, out past the countries and continents of water and land. The dance heated up, and Sven had to drop his black feather coat and his couchin onto the ground. He looked where she pointed and saw it all, the cold west melting into the warm east.
That's wonderful. I really dig that. I, there's a lot of theme there. I mean, I'm getting, you know, gender norming and usury and the cult of personality and the constant complaining, no matter how easy your life is, and that's really beautiful.
It's the end. I never intended to put words into the goddess's mouth. She's my background, by the way.
Okay.
I never intended to put words into her mouth. I thought merely the only thing I was trying to do was work through that idea of wooden people that you get in the Popol Vuh, or you get in some of these old, even as recent as Carlos Castaneda, which is how wooden we become when we're so focused on thinking of people as things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we think of ourselves as things, and especially in heathenry, you think of yourself as an Anglo-Saxon thing, or you think of yourself as a Germanic continental thing, or a Norse heathen thing. And thinghood is like labelhood, and it, in a way, it takes away our ability to be people.
Symbols are wonderful, but perhaps we should leave it to the symbol-minded.
Hmm. Well, if somebody needs to understand you, they'll start by understanding your clothes.
Yeah.
They'll start by understanding your haircut, your skin color. They'll start by understand once you tell somebody your sexual orientation, they'll try to understand you by that. But are any of these really accurate? Do any of them speak to who we really are as human beings?
Yeah.
Does it tell you anything about our personal preferences, what food we like to eat, what behavior we can expect to have? That's one of the big things that in sociology you'll learn first class, really, is that there are a significant number of human beings who believe that race determines behavior, that some people are just genetically criminal,
Yeah.
that gender determines behavior, that sexual orientation determines behavior. And from a
Rather than the
scientific,
soul.
right, exactly. And scientifically speaking, that's not, it's, it's not politically incorrect to say that's just scientifically incorrect. It,
Inaccurate. Yeah.
yeah, it's very inaccurate. And
Yeah.
so
Your
one
geographical
wonders,
location has a lot more to do with your geographical location really doesn't mean a whole bunch deep down, but it has a lot more to do with who you are than what your lineage is.
I think so. There are a bunch of things that Larita and I share that go beyond culture. We were both teachers. We
Yeah.
both found ourselves in the trade of mental health. The progression from being a teacher to working in mental health kind of tells you a bit about a person's character.
Mhm.
However, she had her path growing up in Kenya. I had my path growing up in Vancouver. So how can you say that race determines behavior when
Exactly.
our behaviors coincided so well?
Oh, and I mean, and that I guess that speaks to, and I don't know where it comes from, but you do find people like you and I, for instance. We probably spent a lot of time getting to know each other before we knew any of those details that most people would have included in the first conversation. We talked two or three times before you even said, so did you go to university or what do you do for work? None of that stuff came up. It was all, we were all interested in, well, what does it mean to be you? Like, what is your soul? What is the shape of your soul? And more so than, you know, where did you go to school? Oh, what do you do for the 8 hours a day when you're providing money to your household? Oh, okay. Who do you sleep with? Like, it doesn't, you're absolutely right in that. Does that actually define us, or is that just, and I think that comes down to a lack of empathy, um, laziness, you know, sort of a detachment to the connection that you have with the people around you. And I think some of that comes from technology. When it's so easy to connect with people, you become complacent, right? And
Mm.
you lose what it is to actually connect with somebody. Those moments when you're standing in the bank and you're in line and somebody over at the counter is doing something goofy, and you look at the person next to you and you both look at each other and you go, yeah, there's a human moment. It's a point of connection and there's no words involved. There's hardly any body language involved. It's just an eye contact, and there's something up here going on, right? And we don't have a lot of that because we have so much of this, right? And television and books to a certain extent. But when we and perhaps that is where we go back to those ancient cultures and things. Maybe that is one of the things that our soul is motivating us to look at. And if we don't have that long view, then we'll miss out on that as an aspect that we're searching for, that we are missing, and we can learn from them. And so that's a great thing to look at. And that's what uh what you recited, that's part of where that speaks to me, is like, um you know we and I myself am guilty as well of this, is we focus on the details and we miss out on the bigger picture, the bigger spectrum. you
Well,
know?
that was my impression of godhood when I was exploring those characters, was that you cease to be a shape and you start to become the space between the shapes. And I was having the conversation not long ago with somebody about how there are people who, I forget what the technical psychological condition is, but there are people who start to believe that they are the savior of humankind, that they're, I don't know, Jesus or an avatar or a god on earth or something. And the complaint that I was working with was that once a person does that, it's it might be the onset of schizophrenia. It might, like, how would you classify that? Megalomania isn't necessarily a disorder, but narcissistic personality disorder might come into play. And it technical with like what term or label you would apply to it. Thinking about it later, when you think about something later and you wish you would have said it during the conversation.
Yeah.
I
Hindsight is
thought about it
2020.
later, and I thought, yeah, exactly. That sounds to me like the bottom rung of spiritual transformation. To understand your godhood is a beautiful realization. It's an amazing feeling. If all of that feeling, though, gets trapped in the ego is just too small of a vessel to hold that kind of power.
Yeah.
And
As
for
is the
that
portion
reason,
of the
when a
brain that
person,
the ego occupies, which is a very small portion of the brain. The sleeping mind has all the real estate, right?
absolutely, and I was inclined to say, you know what, they don't have a disorder so much as, like, have you ever thought that they might be right? Maybe that person who believes she's Jesus, the second coming, the part that's right is that we have godhood within us. That's the correct part, I would say. The incorrect part is the delusion that nobody else on earth has it. Because
Yeah.
somehow our minds are trained to think in terms of scarcity. If everybody's a hero, then heroes don't exist. If everybody has godhood within them, then human godhood doesn't exist. The only way that I can be Jesus is if I alone am the savior of humankind. That's the only way. Nobody else can have it. I have to be that special person,
And do you think that
right?
that comes? Do you think that the class system may contribute heavily to that?
Perhaps the economy. Maybe
Yeah.
that's it, that we have a pyramid economy
Yeah.
where you have, something on the top, and then it comes down to the unwashed masses. And we've been working with that pyramid for so long that we can't think outside of it.
Mhm.
Very possibly.
Yeah.
That there has to be, you might even call it blanket supremacy. Like, it wouldn't be any specific supremacy. It would just be simply the idea that one particular something is supreme over all, that one particular gender, race, orientation, whatever. It's sort of an egoistic disease of the mind. That if one is master, then none other can be such. Whereas the
Yeah.
spiritual awakening might start you in that nutshell. It might start you there and say, okay, you've realized your godhood, you've realized your supremacy. This is beautiful, but you cannot come out of this nutshell. You cannot break out of this seed and turn into a tree until you understand some deeper truths about the existence of godhood within everybody.
Mhm.
It's that specific thing that allows you to grow out of that nutshell. So rung on the ladder, absolutely, but not necessarily the only thing. And so it's these contemplations on godhood, and how real the Norse gods could be in a modern context.
Mhm.
Um, because
And
I
it is
find that,
all relatable. I mean, I find a lot of relatable stuff there. and I found Druidry to be so relatable as well. The best stories are the ones that are good for 400 years because they relate in any time period, no matter what has changed in the cultural dynamic, right? And that's why they stand the test of time. You know, that's why they don't go forgotten, because you can always relate it.
Absolutely. I will say there are some things that will have been passed and gone. For instance, I bring in the Expo Dome, the geodesic dome that our Buckminster Fuller designed. That's now Science World. So in 400 years, that may have been passed and gone, but I like putting little marks on the map,
Uh-huh.
because
Easter egg.
it's such an iconic, yeah, an Easter egg. It's such an iconic Easter egg for anybody who's toured through Vancouver.
Mhm.
Little things like the BC Ferry. There's a drama with the passage of time, the building of the Tsawwassen Terminal,
Uh-huh.
and little things like that. Of course, I include stuff like all Norse fiction right now likes to poke at the blood eagle
Uh-huh.
and what it means. And so I wanted to poke fun at that by making it into a meditation for a particularly hardcore individual. So meditating and visualizing yourself being blood eagled,
Why
um,
not?
because like there's some fun that you can have with the concepts, and people who have invested their thought into heathenry kind of they understand them, and I think people are tired of seeing the same old Viking fantasy. uh, I think people want something modern. The protagonist in this story is inspired by the songs of Amon Amarth.
Mhm.
That's where he gets it from. He gets it from being a skid metalhead, and a little autobiography, I guess. But
Yeah, sure.
just being a skid growing up in sort of one of these tourist towns, and the search for his meaning and purpose to the backdrop of Norse metal.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think they kind of I don't know if you're following American Gods, but they did a little nod to that with the whole Marilyn Manson Berserker.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, I think I'm on about episode 4.
okay,
Yeah, of the obviously of season 3. Yeah, no,
it's
and I may reread as well. I read American Gods, and I may go back and reread that. Um, right now I'm so incredibly um almost almost obsessively um digesting Joe Abercrombie right now that I'm very much like that. When I get into a writer, I have a hard time navigating away until I've consumed everything. And
I
then
did
I
that with
become one
Kurt
of these
Vonnegut.
people who whines for 20 years while they're waiting for the new book. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I do. Yeah.
that's there are so many authors out there who kind of lead on me. You'll just read one and you're just like, I want to feel this several times.
Oh yeah.
I think I started with a Wind Up Bird Chronicle or Norwegian Wood.
Yeah.
Norwegian Wood. Yeah, it was a good one. Um, uh, and another magical realist too. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, Vonnegut is very much like that.
Speaking of magical realism, uh
Yes.
this popped into my head early on in our discussion tonight, and I didn't see it as necessarily as totally on topic. And then you were mentioning, discussing schizophrenia and then megalomania versus personality disorder, and I just wanted to mention a real magic that goes on uh, currently that is scientifically proven for a lot of years. It's still pretty underground knowledge, but schizophrenics, if you were to look at it in the right context with an open mind, one might say that a schizophrenic is actually a more highly evolved human being in that they are changelings. A schizophrenic with multiple personalities, um, specifically, um, they can actually, if there's somebody who has a multiple, that multiple may not need glasses, as as does as does like the primary personality. Like that's been scientifically proven. Allergies don't exist in the multiple. Um, the different hand is used to write. There is actually, we say that that's a disorder, but at the end of the day, um, if if we tilted our world a little bit and shifted the way that we've shaped our society, someone like that who has the innate ability to be that adaptable moment to moment,
Mm.
to me that suggests a higher usage of the brain, in that, a condition within the portion of the brain that we're not using egotistically, um, can actually alter the body. It's mind over matter, literally, and it's that shift. It's akin to the myth of the changeling. And I see magic there. I believe that there's magic there, and you know I see where, those things, we sometimes look down on things because we look at them from the wrong angle. And if you took that and you shifted it slightly and looked at it from a different angle, you might go, huh, well, that's something I couldn't do. There's no way.
Mm.
And autistic people is the same way. I knew an autistic person who, you know when he was 6 years old, had a firmer grasp of mathematics than I did when I was 19. you know
Mm.
and yet we call that disability.
Well, you've definitely got my trade because that's what I work in full time, double full
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
I will say that we've been influenced by a lot, and one thing that influenced a lot of people was an article that was being zoomed around social media about mental illness as shamanism.
Okay.
And it spawned a Facebook group, and I joined that group. And you would get industry professionals in there, you would get people who suffered from various disorders in there, and you would get the romantics in there. Three fairly distinct groups of people with fairly predictable responses, at least the industry professionals. You know exactly what they're going to say. You know what they are going to say. Let us not romanticize this. Please do not encourage people to go off meds. Please do not tell people they have magic powers.
Yeah.
Once you start doing that, that unfortunately can have real world consequences.
Yeah.
And those would usually be in response to some of the posts that the romantics would make. Maybe they're not choosing their words carefully enough. So when industry professionals in there, they kind of know how to, well, they know what the dangers can be, some of that romanticism.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so they just want to make sure that the vulnerable groups that are in this Facebook group aren't getting the wrong impression. Delusions do exist. And delusions are sometimes just that. It's you take a look at the brain scans, the MRIs or whatever, the CTs. I'm not super familiar with the terminology. There are parts of the brain that are dark that would otherwise form some sort of resistance to delusions. I mentioned one of them, the belief that you're Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so the belief that your mental illness is akin to some, there might be some archaeological basis, most certainly. And that's another conversation that we could have for hours. There are some beautiful expressions of mentalness in times past. There are also some dreadful ones, such as calling people with mental illnesses witches,
Right.
or sorcerers, or whatever you want to do. Even nowadays, there are countries in the world where people with mental illness are tortured and killed because they're thought to be magical. So that's a bunch of caveat. And I definitely don't want to rain on anyone's parade.
Yeah.
Having personally worked with people diagnosed with schizophrenia, with FASD, and with autism, I would want more people to work in this field so that they could understand how true some things are in that hypothesis and how false others are. I will never tell somebody to go off meds.
Oh,
That is
no.
not my place.
No.
And unfortunately, I've seen, even at the level of guardians, some guardians feel, for spiritual or religious reasons, that the person that they're, luckily this doesn't happen very often, it's usually a family member, that their kid's life is being destroyed by the meds that they're on. No matter what we think about that, I myself grew up in a household with a mom who had bipolar disorder, and she was on a medication roller coaster. And I often thought that she should just drop them. But my purposes were selfish. I wanted her to be a certain way, which is the way that I remembered her. But the way that she changed, you commit to these medications, and that's a commitment. It does allow people to be functional within society, if that's something that they wish to do. It is not something that is done against anybody's will. Nobody can force pills down your throat. Hopefully, there was a time, when that kind of malarkey would happen. But in mental health communities now, we are mindful of the rights of the individual, which include the right to refuse medication. Very mindful, because what's known as a restrictive procedure is one that takes away rights from a human being. And to think that it was not long ago, you're probably familiar with Pinoca and the Institution for the Mentally Ill, was, for all intents and purposes, an asylum. And a lot of stuff went down there in the electroshock therapy phase and the other phases of mental health development. What we have now is in-home residential companionship. And so you have a person who's been trained in courses that you have to update and refresh every single year, has been trained to work with mental illness, and also been trained not to see it necessarily as an illness, but rather to see it as, or a deficit, but rather to see it as a mental health, maybe like a neuro non-typical mental health condition.
And I like non-typical myself. I mean, non-typical is definitely a lot less offensive. I mean, I have a somewhat visual disability myself. I was completely blind till I was 6. I worked with the blind until I was 16, 17. So, I like that we're getting into neuro non-typical and because at the end of the day, like I say, there's things there that we can learn from those people. Those people are not necessarily nothing but a burden. There's wisdom, there's knowledge, and there's scientific discovery, I believe, that is available with people who are non-typical. Because, as I say, we don't, according to science, we use 18% of our brain. There's a lot more going on there than we are aware of, and perhaps these, the non-typical people, perhaps that those brains are the brains that can start to lead to a greater a greater understanding of our own biosystem, you know.
Well, and something that we discuss a lot too is still now in the 21st century, late into the 21st century, or not late into, but at the point where we are, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. First, we need a home. First, we need to be grounded. It's in the yogic system when they talk about the Muladhara chakra, the root chakra, the place that connects you firmly. Now, if a person wants to go off in spiritual adventures and astral travel, having that anchor and that root is 100% necessary.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would recommend to anybody who knows that they have a diagnosis, or even if you haven't been diagnosed, you really don't know, we're all on a spectrum. All of us, we're all on a spectrum.
Yeah.
That root means something. Being financially stable, being physically safe, having helpers. In the owned book that's coming out next solstice, you'll see some rooting exercises that really help develop that root grounding energy that anyone who does astral travel, anyone who does exploration spiritually within and in the cosmos, that is the first thing you do. If you get into anything like witchcraft, or even the forms of witchcraft that appear in Norse witchcraft, like sort of more heathen style things, the first step is making a circle. First step is grounding. First step is anchoring. And in this book, you see what happens to somebody who starts on that path without an anchor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not meant to be a cautionary tale, but with the language of, I guess, neurobiology, I like to pick on that sort of language, though I'm not a specialist myself. He goes through the process that many of us on the magical path go through of becoming empathetic to develop ourselves, which is when you're on the magical path, it's very much a vital first step, because when you're working with forces, before you can say the raid of "I will not harm others," you need to know what harming others actually is. and
how
empathy
simply and accidentally you can do it.
Most certainly, with the best intentions. With the best intentions. And so he's opening up that first channel. And this is a trilogy, by the way. This is just the first book in the trilogy.
Oh, fantastic. That's great.
I know, right? I know.
Just don't make me wait 20 years like George Martin.
It's already written. You're good.
And Rothfuss, I'm not leaving you out of that too. You're starting to bother me too.
Yeah. In the second book, after 3 Valkyries walk into Mead Hall, is I Am Sleipnir, where in his astral travel, the character that he becomes is Sleipnir, the 8-legged horse.
Yeah.
And this is after he's so in this one, he does a lot of walking and hiking, as you can see. In the second book, he ends up in a wheelchair.
Oh, okay.
And it's that transformation and also that liberation, because it causes a lot of liberation. He has, at first, he's filled with resentment, but eventually, like, he comes to know the astral realm and how hardships actually bring us there sometimes. The point of this book is to establish his root and where he's rooted and where he's grounded. I cannot say enough good things about making that transformation of being grounded and rooted. And it's in the form of, I read that excerpt where he's talking to the golden-haired goddess. It's in making that connection with the deity. Now, not everybody on a heathen path makes a connection with a patron deity. It's not like it's required. Nobody's standing
Many
there.
only have natural connection. I know plenty of heathens who connect deeply, deeply, deeply with the ocean, or like extremely, extremely, extremely with a certain kind of tree. You know,
I love
but,
that.
and that's all part of the magical realm too. I mean, what a tree does over the course of the 500 years that they live is pretty amazing. You know.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. There are trees that are older than the Christian religion. There are trees that are older than Jesus.
There's a
You know?
there is a tree in England, covers about 3 acres of land. It's one tree, one root system.
Oh my
It's the
goodness.
largest organism on the planet Earth.
Is
Nearby.
that the one they call Methuselah?
Yeah,
Or is that somewhere else? I don't know.
no,
I
that's
get my names
Methuselah.
mixed up.
They used to call it in the times in the Victorian times they called it the layer of the Leviathan. They believed that the Leviathan lived within there.
Mm.
And then yeah, there's a lot of names for it, and it's a lot of people travel great distances to be there, and everything. You can't go in it anymore. Um, it's protected, thank goodness, right, and rightfully so, because there's too many people out there that will, you know, they had to put a fence around Stonehenge too. You just have to. Unfortunately, you have to.
People are people.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, that's the wonder of nature. You know, people see, again, they see trees as a mundane thing, but when you really consider what goes on there, uh, a tree has a tree that's 1,000 years old could have 10,000 children, 10,000 offspring.
Mm.
You know, could weigh 5 tons. More than a blue whale. You know, just unbelievable. So why wouldn't a person establish that connection as much so as with a deity? You know, I personally felt I I was given all at the same time. I was given sort of signs and and an energetic feeling that came from a Norse deity, and that is what the only reason why I'm not, wearing a white robe uh, on this broadcast and speaking to a bunch of druids right now. That's because I got
Interesting.
the proof.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, also there's the Yggdrasil, the world tree, the world ash tree.
Yeah.
And I've read so many comparisons to what Yggdrasil must mean, because of course it means, well, okay, if you were to translate it literally, you wouldn't get much from it. It would be ugly horse.
Yeah.
But it is known through association that Ig is the name of Odin.
Yeah.
The ugly one, or the shabby one.
Mm-hmm.
And Drasil, the steed of Odin, is how it's sometimes said. Because this is the cosmos. This is the tree that connects all of the realms, above and below, underworld and overworld. And that goes way back to shamanic ideas of what was above and what was below. It was before we had heaven for saints and hell for sinners. We had underworld for ancestors, and for the Svartalvs, and for the Otan, going up into Vanaheim in the overworld, and the branches of Yggdrasil, and Asgard, and Alfheim, and all of the beautiful celestial places.
Yeah.
And then between Ginnungagap, you have Muspelheim, and you have Nibelheim. And so all of these realms are connected with this Yggdrasil. And if Yggdrasil is Odin's steed, then it is the means by which he goes from realm to realm and has all the knowledge of all the realms.
Right.
And so that's kind of beautiful. I wrote a poem assuming it was that, because there's the old Indo-Aryan uh, horse slaying. They would slay a horse, and or they would slay a slave or something. They would slay a tribute. Sorry, I should say tribute.
Yeah, a goat or
mhm.
calf.
And so in my poem, Odin was the one who changed everything in the Indo-Aryan tradition and said, no, this will be my steed, this great ash tree, and it will hold all of the realms. And they'll say, well, what person are you going to sacrifice? He says, I'll sacrifice myself. Because he hangs from that tree and discovers the runes.
To get the runes. That's another, I was waiting for that to come up because I wanted to point out a beautiful synergistic sort of parallel between Irish Celtic belief and Norse belief, and it is the tree of life, the tree of wisdom, right? In it to Druids, it's a hazelnut, right? The hazelnut was the tree of wisdom, and it was beside the well of endless wisdom, which was inhabited by the salmon of wisdom. And the hazel tree would drop its nuts into the water, and the salmon would eat the hazelnuts and gain all this wisdom. And so one day, his name escapes me. One of the Tuatha De Danann went to the well to get that wisdom, and the salmon of wisdom who was there recognized that he wasn't meant for that wisdom, that it was dangerous for him to have it. And so he jumped up and he splashed the well, and it created such a mighty splash that it created the River Shannon, and all the salmon dispersed, and now they only carry a small amount of the wisdom. But the Finn McCool went to the Shannon River and he ate a salmon of wisdom, and that's how he became this incredibly wise leader of the Irish people. And I looked at that story, and then I said, like, there's more similarity here than there is difference. Like there's more congruent than there is that separates these two things. And I really love it when ancient cultures have those parallels. And you go, well, they never ever met each other. They were never even within 500 miles of each other. And yet they came, the horned serpent is all over the world, all over the place. We know we've never seen the fossils of a dragon. We've never seen a dragon. And yet all of the ancient peoples from all over the place all talked about a horned serpent, a dragon. And it's very congruent, the world around, between people who'd never encountered each other until 100 years ago, And I love that. And I feel that there is definitely a deep wisdom there. And it tells us also, my concept is that if you took all of the knowledge that was offered by all the ancient cultures and you combine that, you might get something resembling the real picture, because they all have holes, right? But when you overlap them, you start to have less holes.
Well, and you understand that's been done in the directory of folkloristics.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, I'll get the link for you. UTI story folklore characteristics. There's a whole website. No, that's not it. Story folklore characteristics. So basically, it's an index that sorry, ATI. I was clearly thinking about something else.
ATI characteristics?
Yeah, I think so. I should know this off the top of my head, but it's it'll come to me. It's in my notes for for the lecture series. It was like kind of a footnote. But anyway, there's a world
ATI
index.
mythology and folktale books. Oh, that's never mind. That's an Amazon.
Something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. Just send it to me via Messenger, and I'll add it into the comments section if anybody wants to take a look.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
because you definitely have to send me over the link to your book on Lulu. I guess you've gone with Lulu again.
Yeah, I like, one of the reasons I like Lulu Independent Publishing is because they make a textbook quality book.
Right.
It's a little bit more expensive than the other ones who do more pulp retailers. But you know what? When you look at the readability of it, it's
Yeah.
just much better than pulp, like leaps and bounds better than pulp. And that's important to me because to me, readability is an experience. And I didn't want to go with Amazon. I mean, you can find anything on Amazon, and of course, Lulu puts their books on Amazon because it would be foolish not to. But I don't go through whatever it's called, KDP, the Amazon book creator, because I them my intellectual. I would rather go. The book package goes out, the Breathe and Heathen 9. That's 3 kids' books, this trilogy, and then 3 owned books.
Okay.
When those packages go out, they're all going to be locally printed. I found better luck, more satisfaction, more customer satisfaction in terms of the quality of book. And yeah, I have to charge $32.99 Canadian for this, which is $22.99 US. That's a little more than other books, but it's a way better product, and I support independent, and that's just what I'm doing with it. I want people to have a nice reading experience. And so when I say textbook quality book, you sort of like see that for instance, the crispness of the images is really nice. I've illustrated it myself, and I really like to put my all into it. And so the way that it rendered, the way that it came back in the proof was just so beautiful. I love what they do for cover options. It's a scant few different cover options. You can do your own cover option if you want to, but I just went with a template. But I really, you can't get this with a Harlequin pulp.
No,
you just can't.
Nope.
It's just they do like a subtle, like a light cream, so that it's like the blaring white that they do offer is just a little hard on the eyes, and so I've done it in a sort of a cream color for the background.
It is hard on
and
the
then
eyes. A lot of electronics manufacturers are getting away from pure white as well.
yeah, it's tough on the eyes. It is, and it's the font I've used is just your Arial 11 point, so it's highly readable, a good product. And so if you're wondering why the big price tag on it, that's the reason. But it will be available at tinyurl.com/3 Valkyries. And I'll send that to you. I do the tiny urls because the URL that they give is ridiculous, but it's a secure URL. And this is a pre-launch. So if you do purchase off the site, I haven't done any of the steps of publication, including the launch, including the promotions, including all that. So you would be getting it before the world knows about it.
Awesome.
So that's kind of bragging rights.
And that's going to make it a collector's. It's like pre-first edition.
Exactly.
And you know what? Years, that's going to make it worth as much as the Jungle Book, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Act now, and you can send it to me, and I will personally autograph it and send it back to you.
Awesome.
I know that publishing houses, like big publishing houses, will sponsor tours. My sponsorship at the moment is limited to my regional boundaries. And so that's just where I'm going with it. It is a self-published thing. I am doing this on my own Steam.
Yeah.
But the true meat of it's going to be, and am I allowed to talk about Awaken Network? I always ask.
We're keeping that pretty quiet. The name is floating around,
Okay.
but that's really all we're saying right now. Particularly because there is pending contracts at the moment.
Right. So
Yeah.
can I just say that I will be a part of that, and that will be the meat of my my promotion, like being in that guild. I want to help people the way that my mom helped people, to find a path to creativity, to find a path.
Why don't we say this? The two of us are going to be working extremely hard sometime in the next 5 months to be offering an avenue for people to get a steady supply of fiction and nonfiction books written by independent or unsigned writers, and on a monthly subscription basis, which is going to be a lot more profitable for the artist and a lot more cost effective for the reader.
That's more than I was going to say, so thank you.
Yeah.
I'm purposely treading lightly, but thank you. That says it. That sums it up.
Yeah.
Basically,
if anybody wants to know about that, drop a comment and I'll put you in the data bank and you will know about it. And you can also start sending, I mean, as of right now, I'm willing to say you can start sending manuscripts to the two of us, be they PDF or whatever, and we'll start taking a look, because we are going to be looking for the talent.
I would be really happy to see that. If you're going to do that, it should be as near to complete as possible. The best edit that you can do personally. I've seen it where someone sent. Yeah, I've seen it where a person has a manuscript and they're like, no, wait, like 2 weeks in, actually, I want to change this chapter, and you're like, you know what, come back to me when it's complete. I don't want to be snooty or anything like that. It's just a little unnerving. This is something my mom did as a, for her bread and butter, and so I've seen a lot of manuscripts, but it's
we don't want to be editors.
Right, exactly. Get that professionally edited if you can. That's what I do. Even though I have editing experience, I don't trust myself. So I just get someone to sign off on it that they read through it and caught all the nicks and burbles. So, that's the way that goes. We need to take back from the industry. I hate to say it, but I've known too many writers who turned into, like, writers are kind of the frontline staff, the lowest paid, by excessive margins. Yet they are the talent and they're providing the work. And I've just met too many writers who have found more profit getting into the industry side. And I guess that's just the way it is. The management seems to be. And so the question becomes, what if it were a guild system and the management were the talent? Is this even possible? That's the question. The answer is yes. We've seen numerous individuals who are like that. Popular sort of folk singer, I guess, Lorena McKennitt is her own manager. There are a lot of other Canadian musicians who are also producers. Jeff Martin's an example. There's so many examples, loose examples all over the place. I know the Canadian ones. I'm not as familiar with the American ones. But
there's a band from San Francisco that did their first two albums themselves. They recorded it in a garage. They went on to a little bit of fame. They're called Metallica. It's it's not a big deal, but
kind of an obscure reference. You got to talk about things people know, all right? Yeah. Well, that's the thing, and a lot of the genius comes from people who know how to push their own stuff. It's easy to get taken advantage of on, surfing the web, the high seas of the internet. Very easy, because people will try to get you into, for instance, Amazon schemes. I've
Mhm.
seen that package, and it's this clickbait. Do you want to be a star kind of stuff? Do you want to make passive income and become a multimillionaire overnight? Avoid that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Go ahead and get burned a few times so that you learn your lesson, but don't ever give up.
Yeah. Or just come to us because even if you don't end up working with us, one of the two of us will be able to at least point you in the right direction and sort of give you the watch out fors. That's at the end of the day, the motivation for the two of us is for people to succeed outside of the corporate structure. Um, that's I don't care how it happens, but if that happens, then that's a good thing, and I will support that. Um,
Well, we will even find in our support of that, I think, that the industry obviously doesn't want us to do this. It's
no.
going to be an uphill struggle, but we already know that going into it.
Mhm.
You know, um, no gain without some pain.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think that's part of the purpose of, like, everyone needs some driving force when they write a piece of fiction. That's part of the purpose of creating this
Mhm.
piece of fiction, because the protagonist struggles and struggles, and life gets darker and darker and darker. Uh, Typical Lord of the Rings style writing.
Yeah.
Things just get darker and darker and darker, and you find a million reasons to abandon a project. You find a million reasons to just go back with the flow, go back to the industry, tail tucked between your legs. So many reasons. You'll be given so many reasons.
Mhm.
But I think having the fire, having the fight, that was something that my mom used to tell me quite a bit. Got to have that fight in you.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, at the end of the day, and you had mentioned, is it possible for the guild system to work? Well, sure it is, because the guild system worked 3,000 years ago, when we didn't have cars, planes, trains, automobiles, and things like that. So to insinuate that that system wouldn't work today is ludicrous. Because sure, absolutely. Why? Because uh, if I really wanted to be a person who worked with independent artists in order to get books published, then I would find a way for there to be a big panel truck, and a small printer. And I would literally go and pick up the books from the printer and haul them to the place that I had to haul them in order to make that work. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's, there's a level of commitment there required, sure, but nothing's undoable, in today's world. And we have um, there's a growing community of people who's looking to get outside of the corporate structure, and in a lot of cases it's unaffordable, or it's hard to even source it because, unfortunately, as we're non-corporate, we're also, you know sort of against people profiteering. Therefore, we don't allow people to promote their own stuff in the pagan community as much as we should, so people don't know where to get it. And, you know
Uh,
with the scarcity of sales comes a higher price than there would be if people just if somebody's able to do something 8 hours a day, they get way better at it. They become more efficient at it. It becomes more affordable, and they can work with their customers better. And the whole purpose of the guild system that we're working on is to provide that to people, to get people out of their enslaved pyramid scheme 9 to 5 jobs and do what they love, in order to better our community in general.
Absolutely. I'm with you there. Uh, I What I like about the online platform is they give you the PDF, So
Yeah.
if you can get a better deal than print on demand, because the print on demand, if you get it through the online bookstore, that's going to send me about half the cover cost. If you get it through Amazon, it'll give me less than $1 per book.
Yeah.
But they feel secure and confident in giving you a large share of the profit. They also feel secure and confident in giving you a PDF so that you can take it to your own local print shop. We have a print shop in Lethbridge. It's right down the road. I'm struggling to think of the actual name of it anyway. Old hippie syndrome. It's excellent. I'll share it with in the comment section or something. It's where I get my printing done. They do amazing work. They do layouts, and they're locally owned and operated. And for bulk discounts, for perfect binding, they'll do big orders and they'll pull down the cost the more that you order. Like you would expect from a bigger operation, but they do it in-house, and what they can't do in-house, they get done in Calgary. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And sometimes the best answer to what you're looking for is in your own backyard. A lot of times it is. All of my favorite stuff was created by friends and family. I have a house full of oddities and curiosities that come by means of local artists. Everything down to the stuff that I wear on my person, to the stuff that, my Mead horn, things like walking sticks. There's just a great industry out there. I just want to see it flourish.
And we all do. And there's a big community of people out there who do, and we're going to do it. We're going to get everybody off of Facebook.
Oh man, I've been so bad trying to.
It's getting ugly. It's getting really ugly.
I go on there, and I have friends who, like, they've had birthdays or something, and I feel guilty because it's been like a week or 2 weeks or whatever. I'm like, happy belated, or like, there's so many ways that we've given over our lives to Facebook, and I just get busy. I want to check in with these people that I know and love, and I feel like I'm hurting them by not jumping on Facebook every day. And I'm just like, what are we doing with ourselves?
Yeah.
What it's beautiful. The people that I've met through various different social media platforms, totally worth it. I've met some incredible individuals, yourself among them. Well, we've sustained through social media, and so it has its purposes, but there's also this big, beautiful world out there filled with forested mountains.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of which, for anybody who's interested in foraging, I've got a brand new action cam on the way. There's a lot less snow up the mountain, and I'm right out of Old Mansbeard. So probably this coming weekend, I'm gonna be strapping on the headgear and wandering up the mountain to collect some Old Mansbeard, and hopefully some of the fungus that is sort of there's a lot of winter fungus around here. We don't get super cold here, but we do get very low light, so the fungus does flourish into from about mid-February till June. So I'm going to go up there and start harvesting, and everybody can take a look at that. It's really only going to be super valuable for people from the Northwest, because that's my geographical climate location. But if you do want to see some lovely scenery, and I will be right up above the Creston Valley with a full view of that. So anybody who wants to tune in and see that journey is more than welcome. That should be a lot of fun, and I'm going to turn that into a series because I have gotten too busy and I haven't been doing enough exercising, and I'm going to be doing a little more of that in the coming in the coming months. So look, check for that, watch for that, and that'll be probably here or somewhere in the sphere of this, whether that's origins or knowledge for growth or the aforementioned soon coming awaken network. It remains to be seen, but you'll find it somewhere in here. Send me a message if you're wondering when that project is happening, and I'll send you a link.
That's
And
super exciting.
we mentioned your other project. I guess it's a prequel to your previous owned book.
Yeah, so the way that happened, the official release was Summer Solstice 2020. And it was a release without a flourish, obviously. It was done in a not so crowded cafe with limited capacity and mask mandates. Not that I'm complaining.
No.
However, obviously I couldn't tour it, or didn't want to. And I really thought that when it hit the industry, I'd be finding lots of like-minded people who use breathing exercises for heathen astral travel. And there are a lot of people like that out there. It does exist, still in its infancy. I think it's a bit more obscure. I think there's some people who are really wearing a shaman badge, who might be interested in it, but already have their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was never really my intent when I wrote it. I think I was writing more for me than others. That book is going to become owned for heathen astral travel. It will be a different volume. It will probably become the second book, whereas owned for health, vitality, and creativity needs a proper foundation. And so that's why I've been working on those samples that I've been sending to you. Things accessible for anybody. For instance, the ever popular tide breath, or the power breath, which is pretty incredible, that focuses on the solar plexus. There are going to be grounding breaths. There are going to be heart breaths, breaths that work with the energy center. It gets into the science of the respiratory system as a refresher from my school. Hopefully people were paying attention back then. And if not, I have crude explanations in this book that will help you isolate your breaths and find out where in the body your breaths can go, and is absolutely fundamental, foundational for further studies in breath work. A lot of times people do breathwork ceremonies that involve more of the esoteric ones. Nothing wrong with that. I would say that we've talked about before, hyperventilation is not something any physician would ever recommend. And pranayama at its core is not an activity of getting high with breath. It's an activity of being, not getting high so much as being high with breath. That is to say, creating balance within your body so that it has its most optimal conditions, by which then you can jump forward to more spiritual practices like astral travel and inner magic working and that sort of thing. It's the other side of the ubiquitous trend of what I call wishcraft. So much wishcraft out there. It often goes under the name manifesting abundance. And I've put words like manifesting abundance into my vernacular, so I can't call out other people for doing it. But it starts to sound like the prosperity gospel, where all we're really focused on is manifesting money, money, money. And our financial goals are simple, and they all take place in the real world. You follow your passion, you find what you're good at, you make money. It seems simple to me. Maybe it's harder for others. The true work that you can do with breath is not so much witchcraft, but teaching and training your mind and body to get the most out of existence. You don't need a nickel for that. Yet it's so valuable that you couldn't buy it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's the most fundamental basis of quality of life. Receiving enough oxygen in the correct way is simply going to enhance your quality of life right off the bat. That's step one. Be healthier, and breathing properly is going to do that. And then you can look at being healthier, and then being healthier.
Well, that was always the goal for the Ashtanga of yoga, the samadhi, the feeling of one with all,
Mm-hmm.
which I think it almost became a cliche or a platitude that the purpose of meditation was to be one with all. And if somebody tells you, I was one with all, and they hear that, what are they picturing? It's almost not even worth telling them.
Yeah.
It's bliss, it is. Ananda, or as
Yeah.
it's often called.
Nirvana.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. The nirvana state. And I think, for instance, when you read the Gospel Sri Ramakrishna, they refer to death as the Mahasamadhi, the great bliss, being completely bliss, no longer being encumbered by the restraints of your physical body. But breathing exercises can very much give you a taste of what the Mahasamadhi feels like. But it doesn't stop with breathing. It should be known, and I'm really selling this, breathing, but breathing is only really a step. You've got your niyamas to do. You've got your asanas to do, your yamas. And the breathing part, the pranayama, really just leads to that gateway where you go pratyahara and go inwards, and you do your dharana and dhyana, your focus and your concentration and your meditation. And really, it's all of these things working together that bring you to that samadhi. But as much as I bring that up in the astral travel book that I published, I feel like these terms are obscure to Western audiences to an extent. Either I'm not saying that people are dumb or they don't know those words, just saying that maybe meanings get attached to those words that don't necessarily reflect them. I mean, look at how the word karma is used in popular vernacular. It's tough, right? And I think that it would be better to have a foundational understanding of just the breathing itself, because there's just so much you can get into. And in many ways, the breathing itself, when it balances you, it transforms you. It's very transformative. So keep your eyes on the horizon. And then the third in that series is owned for creativity, just creativity. Breath plus anything that you want to do, writing, acting, dancing. Breath is used in so many applications like that. I wanted to make a tangible manual. I come from a theater background, but I've also gotten my degree in literature there, and I see so many similarities between the arts. And those similarities seem to find a vector point in breathing.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, well, I think that's all for us tonight. I got to get up super early, so we need to do a little bit of a wrap up, and we'll say goodbye to our friends. Remember to sometime tomorrow, you'll probably if you're watching this as a replay, look down at the comments section below on YouTube. You're going to see the link to contact Breathin about getting on this pre-launch list for the for the book. Three Valkyries walk into a Mead hall, and also you'll find that same info on the Origins Facebook page. on my personal Facebook page, JJ Shaw. Anywhere that you're going to also be broadcasting that?
I will be broadcasting that in the real world, or the
You're gonna, you're,
ouch. I'm sorry. Physical world.
yeah,
Whoops.
you're gonna hit the pavement.
Yeah, it's I have a partnership with Plum Lethbridge,
Okay. Yeah.
which is an establishment that's launching its own series of online interactions, but mainly does their basis of operations within their cafe. Yeah.
Oh, so
Uh,
yeah, so you're gonna do the cafe again? That's
yeah,
awesome.
that's the official launch point. They're just what they do is they work with a lot of organizations, including Sage Clan and Lethbridge, who are very much protectors and providers for people who find their homes either temporarily or long term on the streets
Hmm.
of Lethbridge and area.
Hmm.
And they just, because of all of the good that they do, and they don't even just wait for an institution to approve it, they just do it just to do it. And
Yeah.
so there's such great positive vibes there. And so that's a place I've chosen to connect these projects with. So anything Plum will be, and also breatheandheathen.ca is my website. But yeah, keep your eyes on the skies, because the official launch will be coming up soon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we'll put a pin in the episode. Thanks everybody for showing up, and we'll see you next Sunday, where we will be covering
My favorite.
your favorite. Where are we? I can't even. No, I'm gonna cheat and look at the outline now.
Go for it.
We got. Oh yeah, right. Anti-heroes.
Hey,
For lack of a more Norse terminology.
this book is filled with anti-heroes, anti-heroism, by the way.
Very good.
Thoroughly postmodern.
That's good because there is no actual evil or good. It's it's I mean, if you're a dualist, then you don't see there being a clear-cut good and evil. It's just, people trying to get by.
Oh, the guy who cut me off in traffic today, pure evil.
Fair enough. Did you give him the Deerfoot finger?
Yeah, right. You know it.
Right on, buddy. Okay, bye everybody. Have a great night.
Skull.
Stop live stream.